All right, I have to use the microphone because we're being televised online as well. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jeff Haynes. I'm with Boyle Investment Company. We are grateful that you came out on a Wednesday night. Those who are watching online, we're grateful that you're doing that. This is our third public meeting, third meeting on Project Phoenix, and we're grateful that you all are here. My great-grandfather, Henry Clay Haynes, bought a farm in Castellan Springs in 1890. My grandfather, Joe D. Haynes, was born and raised on that farm. I spent every summer growing up on that farm, oftentimes coming downtown at the co-op with my grandfather. My father, Joe Man Haynes, graduated from Gallatin High School in 1955 and then served in the Tennessee State Senate for 28 years. He cared deeply about this community. He is smiling today on his 89th birthday in heaven, knowing that we're in his hometown talking about a project that would be very meaningful to him. Our family still owns 55 acres in Castellan Springs. We raised our 4 children on the weekends going up there, and so now 5 generations of Hayneses have celebrated being a part of this community. I joined Boyle in 2001 to open the office. Boyle was started in 1933 by the Boyle family. The family's roots go back to John Overton, who founded Memphis, with Andrew Jackson and James Winchester. We are a long-term owner, developing projects like the one that we're talking about here tonight. We've assembled a team of professionals who share our passion for building communities in walkable mixed-use settings and dynamic neighborhoods like Gallatin. James Fenton called us 3 years ago after touring several of our projects and said, would you all come to downtown Gallatin and do one of your mixed-use projects? So we spent some time looking at all the different land assemblages and determined that it was going to be very challenging to get a piece of land large enough given the multiple ownerships of all the parcels. We happened to be meeting in City Hall and said, what about these two idle parking lots? And that's how Project Phoenix was conceived 3 years ago. I'm going to turn it over to John Harlan, one of our development team members, and he's going to run through our presentation, and then we're going to turn it over to Kevin Clark with Historical Concepts to go through some architectural options.
Thanks, Jeff. First of all, thanks for everybody coming out. I think what I'd like to do is just give a brief overview of kind of where we are today with Project Phoenix and what that is. And I know there's a lot of people watching too, just to kind of clarify. So we have been in what's called a memorandum of understanding with the city for over a year and a half now. And basically, we're still in what's called a feasibility phase of determining whether this is a feasible project to move forward with or not. So the intent of this meeting, as we are continuing on kind of our next phase of potential design of the project, is really to solicit feedback. As Jeff mentioned, we've had 2 previous meetings with downtown stakeholders here to solicit some feedback related to concerns and other areas of interest with the project and what it is and what it can be and what it's not allowed to be per the memorandum of understanding. So I'm going to walk through just a brief presentation that we have shared previously. Parts of that we previously shared with some other groups. And then at that point, we'll turn it over to Kevin to kind of walk through where we are just today on what's called the conceptual master plan. Per this meeting, we'll have an interactive piece which is going to allow you guys to log in and answer a handful of different questions and gauge some interest related to what we've shown on the screen. So I just want to lay that out before we start getting into the presentation. We will, at the end of the presentation, if there are any kind of individual questions or concerns that you want to raise, we'll be glad to meet with you. We're going to use this, it's called Mentimeter, at the end as more of a guide for feedback. And really it's to listen. It's to say, hey, these are things that we've laid out that we feel like we've heard that could or could not be important to the stakeholders of downtown and to the community, and get a gauge on where we are with the master plan. To start out, as Jeff mentioned, when we looked at the conceptual design of the parameters that we had with the project, we really started with, this is a public document of back from 2008, with which the Gallatin City Council at the time, I'll read this quote here on the right, was really looking to what is the long-term plan and vision for downtown. So I'm going to go through just a couple of quick slides showing what the downtown master plan was looking like. This is over 17 years ago. And Kevin, if you don't mind, click to the next slide. You'll see here they've got the current Greenway kind of items and key themes: the Town Creek Greenway, downtown library, new parks and plazas, downtown housing, and enhancement of the public square. So as we looked at this document from a master planning perspective, as we went out and worked with certain consultants, we said, let's take what previous leadership within the city has already done or identified as potential key markers of importance for downtown and incorporate that into our conceptual plan. As you'll see here, you've got this block with City Hall marked. Again, you've got the activation for the Town Creek Greenway there as well. This stands, just to point out, you've got City Hall. I do want to point out, as we'll show some design images later, a pocket park, structured parking, etc. And just as a reminder, this is a 2008 document. Again, Town Creek Greenway. As Jeff mentioned, when we look at projects, Boyle's a long-term owner and holder of real estate, and we primarily have been focused on mixed-use development. And when we say mixed use, that is a multitude of different product types. Primarily, that's been office, retail, and more of recent multifamily, all within a complex environment of development on different parcels. What we have shown up here today, just to give a little bit more background on Boyle, is what we call 5 of our really key projects that we've done in and around Middle Tennessee. This first project, Capitol View, is located just west of the State Capitol building on Charlotte Pike. If you're familiar with it, where HCA's headquarters is in Pearland, this was completed, Jeff, 2018. Includes office, multifamily, over top of retail, a downtown urban Publix. So a very complicated mixed-use development in an urban environment. The next one is called City Park Brentwood. You'll see here, as I point, this is located just off of Franklin Road, where the Moreland Mansion is located, a historic home right in the heart of Brentwood, where we had preserved the existing historic structure with infill development, wrapping a hotel, adding about 40,000 square feet of retail to an existing already 500 square foot office park. I'll kind of move on down here quickly. Meridian is our kind of first bellwether development that was done in Cool Springs, incorporated about 2 million square feet of office and mixed-use retail. CHS's headquarters was the first office tower that was constructed there in the late 2007. One of our newest developments that I'll showcase here is McEwen Northside. We have just finished or close to finishing the last phase there. We just completed about 200,000 square foot office tower. This includes office, retail, over 600 units of apartments. Again, just to highlight some of the dense environments that we've worked in, what we're normal to working in with multiple blocks with multiple uses. And the last project I'll just highlight is Berry Farms, if you're familiar with, as you go south on I-65 towards Paytonsville Road. This is a 600-acre master plan development that has been worked through for some time. We are now, I'd say, just about done with our first phase there called Town Center, which includes residential for sale product as well as rental product, Publix grocery anchored retail, and office, just specific user driven and multi-tenant mix. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to Kevin Clark, and Kevin is a principal with Historical Concepts. So when we got started with the memorandum of understanding for the project, the first call we made was Historical Concepts. I'm going to let him give a little bit of background about his firm. This will speak to why we hired them to engage in the feasibility and look at potential planning for a project like this, particularly in a historic downtown of Gallatin. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Kevin, and he's going to walk through a little bit of their background, and then we'll share some of our conceptual design to date.
Thanks, John. As John said, my name is Kevin Clark. An architect and planner with the firm Historical Concepts. We are an architecture and planning firm. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. I guess we're about 40 years old, and really have our roots in Southern architecture. This is just a snapshot of some of our projects. But as John said, sort of our ethos is that we go into a place, we study it, we understand it as best we can as outsiders, recognizing that we're outsiders. Go into a place, study it, and then sort of figure out a way to move forward with potential new buildings that look really in character and in keeping with history. So I thought it might be helpful just to share a little bit about our process, kind of how we approach a project like this. We've had the good fortune, as John said, to work with some small towns and also developers in small towns or adjacent to small towns or even in new towns that want to look and feel as great as historic towns. So just going to walk through real quick a little bit about our process. So obviously, our name is Historical Concepts. We start first by understanding the historical context of a place, and I'm giving you all sort of a little bit of background, sort of in our approach to planning process. Obviously, this is not Gallatin specific. We're right in the middle of this with Gallatin, but I wanted to share with you sort of the typical way that we approach project. We look at data and anything that we can find online, and also on the ground, understanding what makes that place special and unique. So sometimes that's aerial maps, both historic and new. Certainly it's also the architecture. We're not just planners. We're also engaged highly in the 3-dimension, and so much of what makes a place and our experience of walking down a street is understanding the context. And it's fascinating because we do get to work in a lot of different places, how much similarity and then differences there are both in architecture and plans. We're kind of nerds, so we also break this down into sort of like data. We look at these places, we look at the buildings, and we start to sort of identify proportions and scale so that we can sort of understand that DNA and then apply it to new designs. That includes, some detailed work of actually sort of measuring the sidewalks. Why does this place feel so great? Well, it might be because of the sidewalk. It might be because of the street tree. It's because of the way the parking is, or maybe how high the buildings are on either side of the street. And we literally get on the ground to understand scale and proportion of places, so that when we're designing new places or designing within the context of an existing place, we have that DNA in our heads. So we kind of codify that information, I'll say, so that we understand where a launching point can be for new design. Sanborn Maps, if you guys aren't familiar with the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company, is a fantastic resource, for historic looking. It was an insurance company that did a ton of mapping, and it's all online resources for historic maps. In fact, they actually went up through the 70s. But looking at historic maps and plats and aerial, we want to understand, what has this place been, and what is it today? What is the existing lot lines and plots and topography? So that is all part of our analysis and base mapping. And then I mentioned the term DNA, but we can get really enamored with beautiful buildings, but we can also look to the details of how those buildings are placed, building to building. These are little diagrams that we did as a study to show from sort of one town to the next what sort of the density of buildings is among some towns. And so you can walk through these towns and sort of feel a difference from one to the next. This way we can actually kind of put it into data. It's not rocket science and it's not ours. We study great materials of books that have been written. Making great places is an art, and Americans used to do it really well, and I think we can continue to do so. So our goal with historical concepts is to continue to add to the built environment, and we do that sort of on the shoulders of giants, and some folks that have written some great books about how to make great places. And then we get to put it on paper, and that's really sort of the most fun process. But we like to have a ton of information up front so that when we first do that launch into design, it's really an informed design. And that's, as John said, that's really what today is about. So we're right in the middle of this sausage making process, which is that we're still understanding the DNA and the details. So we've done a lot of this data diving to start with. But we also, we have a lot more to go. And so what we've got today, I'm going to just sort of walk you through beyond the history of HC, now a little bit of where we're at on Project Phoenix. So
I want to make one point real quick. So before he gets in, this is when we had the memorandum of understanding signed for an addendum. This was the first exhibit of where we started. It's almost like a crown diagram to say, conceptually, here's where we started with the parameters of the MOU, with the maximum number of units you could potentially have. You've got a big massing of a parking deck here in the middle. I just want to point that out. Potentially a hotel, city hall, and then the second block with multifamily and a wrap parking deck. So that's where we started, and I'll let him take it from here.
Yeah, so John said we were the first call. I think we were the second, because because as is often the case, just an initial yield study is really what typically happens right off the bat. And so we're often brought in after that initial yield study is done to then sort of, saying, okay, we've got that initial yield study. Now let's actually get into a little bit of design work. And so just sort of, placing, really kind of, having y'all walk through our shoes. So when we came, our first introduction to Gallatin obviously was meeting with staff coming to town, and then also sort of having this concept or a yield study diagram in place. But we pulled that away. We kind of threw it away, as we often do when we start projects, and we just started looking at what are we dealing with here. And so project parameters wise, what are the sites? We kind of have two blocks. We call them Block A and Block B. Obviously, you have the existing city hall that we're sitting in today. A lot of surface parking. Some things that jumped out to us right away was just the grade difference. How much difference there is as the street falls. And so often you see in these old towns that the main street is built on a high point, and then the town sort of falls away from that. Again, a deeper dive into sort of rights of way and understanding sort of the context of what we're dealing with today. And so that sort of takes us to the quick initial concept that we created based on some conversations and feedback, obviously, with the Boyle team. And so high level, what you're looking at here is a sort of ground level plan, sort of a main floor plan on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, this is sort of like a below grade plan, we'll say. But as I mentioned, one of the first things that we noticed in the yield study was above ground decks, and saw that in the 2008 master plan as well. And so as a first focus, as we thought about Block A, we said, gosh, what if we were to use the grade to our advantage? We've got a drop off of a story, actually a little more than a story from Main Street to Franklin's. We said, why don't we use that to our advantage and actually consider parking underground? We've seen that very successful in other towns, and a huge benefit to that is that now everything above grade is things that you want to look at, which is not necessarily the car, but buildings and courtyards and coffee shops. And so that was sort of the first pass here at Block A, and then obviously Block B, recognizing we wanted to focus on the town creek and sort of opportunities and amenities back there. So kind of blowing that up a little bit more for y'all, and I've rotated it so we can make it a little larger. Main Street is here now on the right-hand side of the street. We introduced a new street, which is effectively sort of a new north-south street, which is a continuation of Enlow Street. So looking at how Gallatin was initially laid out, you had sort of larger blocks here, and then you immediately go into sort of smaller blocks. Sort of that block length is something that we notice and kind of note from town to town. It's always varied, but here, and one of the things we found is so often, the narrower or the shorter the block lengths, the more vibrant a town can be. You get more front doors. So again, sort of high level concept of what we've put together is, considering sort of this is the city hall location. Understand that the possibility of a new city hall. We kind of said, all right, well, what happens if that was effectively sort of where we are? It's a great sort of anchor to Main Street and the location on the corner here. Still a great front door on the Main Street. But what if there was a sort of public park, plaza, or something? Some sort of public open space onto the side. So City Hall now had, sort of a second face, sort of a nod to more of the center of town, and a public gesture that it could be a gathering space. Series of sort of apartments and mixed use, a little hotel. All those things are sort of outlined, as John said, in an MOU. But what we wanted to do was really sort of break down the scale. And so you'll see the rectangles that we've shown on here also have a lot of breaks in them, both in plan, and then we also imagine in vertical massing. When we start this process, we obviously look towards sort of the great architecture of the past, which oftentimes is a lot more broken up. You had sort of smaller landowners or smaller properties, and sort of landowner to landowner would be different from property to property. So we try and sort of emulate that in new designs as well. Again, high level concept is sort of how this is laid out. Obviously, the Town Creek green space, understanding from that 2007 master plan how valuable and important that was, and introducing a north-south connection to that, both we think on Enslow Street, which could be a fantastic connection, but also sort of in between the buildings here.
And before he just moves to that, I just do want to reiterate. So, from a conceptual, yield analysis at this point, you would be looking in the range of this entire both blocks A and B. You can't have any more in the MOU than 300 residential units. So I think this yield potentially, give or take, is 250 residential units potentially split between two blocks. You've got a parking deck on the second block, which is, say, close to 400 spaces. And then the subterranean garage, we again are just in this feasibility phase, if we're looking at the potential of a new city hall, would be underground and over 200 spaces. There's also street parking that would be included in that as well.
So because we aren't just planners, we're architects, we have a hard time not also wanting to sort of elevate this. And I would say these aren't necessarily design drawings as much as they were sort of like massing conceptual drawings. So this is, sort of looking, sitting on a sidewalk here on Main Street, looking out to sort of what we envisioned was this sort of new city park. Maybe there's a little, coffee shop or ice cream shop that could possibly be sort of within that footprint of the park. And then, this is actually the hotel that we showed in the site plan. Looking at it actually as a multi-story hotel that actually has a staggered height. So it may have a portion of it that's one height, another portion that's a shorter height. Now, kind of, coming up into a little bit more of a bird's eye view. Again, you get sort of the other side view of that park. Perhaps this could be sort of a city hall. Again, we're not sort of saying this is the architecture. It's really more sort of the gesture of what we would see in terms of how a building might sort of front onto the park as a city hall, with obviously that Main Street that Main Street entrance and that main entrance on Main Street. And then on the backside of the park, we think there's a great opportunity for a little bit of mix of uses, maybe a little restaurant that obviously could front on. You could imagine, the opportunity for some outdoor seating or dining that could kind of spill out onto that sidewalk around the park. And then thinking about Town Creek, looking at if we did have a parking garage that wasn't lined, maybe there's an opportunity to really make it an amenity. What if it's you kind of have an outdoor movie theater? We've seen that as successful in other towns. And again, sort of not really latching onto any architecture, but just sort of thinking about the massing that might occur, with a multi-unit building here, backing up onto Town Creek. And then, coming back around to the other side, so looking onto Franklin Street here, sort of shielding the parking garage from the real pedestrian experience out here on Franklin. So these would be sort of liner buildings that would, that could, again, be units, could be retail, could be office. Just really thinking about sort of a block building to sort of hold that edge. So that kind of takes us to sort of the concept of where we are now. And as I said, we're right in the middle of sort of the learning process. So obviously it looks like we've done a lot. Sometimes our architectural drawings can look more finished than they really are. But today and as John said, 2 meetings that he's had, or a couple of meetings that they've had before this, is really about gathering feedback. And so we have a program here, and it's not that our program, but it's a program that John mentioned called Mentimeter. And so it will be the way that we will be able to grab some feedback from y'all in terms of, if I can get my computer to work for me here.
And while he's pulling that up, so what we're going to do is we'll take kind of all our feedback and notes that we've had from this meeting and previous meetings, this is the first interactive piece we've done, with the project, and then they will consolidate that basically into like a report that we're going to take and present to City Council. We have to do that before November 11th in a work session, so that'll be posted as a public meeting. So we'll take our feedback and gathered over the last month, put that together, and then see how that changes or influences the concept plan.
Awesome. Thanks, John. That bought me just enough time. So, again, we've used this in the past. We feel like this is a wonderful tool to be able to sort of get real-time feedback from a lot of folks. Obviously, not knowing how many folks show up to a meeting, this is an opportunity to get a great feedback from a lot. So, I think some folks may be watching online. They can go to www.menti.com and enter the code 1278-5177. That will repeat on every slide if you're showing up late. And obviously, if you're in the room, and you might be able to do it online too, use your camera on your phone and that QR code, and that'll be the way that we'll be able to kind of really gain a lot of feedback. We've got maybe just a dozen questions. Some of them is sort of about you. We want to know sort of who's here. What your connection is to Gallatin. We've got some architectural feedback questions. Again, those renderings that we did are really more sort of about masking and character. Now is the time to really start leading our pencil and figuring out sort of where the town wants to go in terms of the character of buildings. And then a series of other questions we've got about about sort of maybe project details, things that we can explain a little bit more. So I'm gonna click ahead here.
Has everybody had a chance, if you want to log in, to log in? And is there anybody that doesn't have a smartphone with them that I've got to, here you go.
So for, really kind of first questions, I wanted to throw some softballs out here. These should be easy, and nobody's checking IDs. So first question is really, again, just sort of gauging sort of who, who's in the audience. So we're always curious to know what your age, and we'll never ask you in public except for these public meetings. Appreciate you all having feedback. And also, again, as this process goes, you'll see you don't have to answer every question, but obviously any question that you answer will be helpful to us. When I click through to the next slide, you may see on your screen that it says presenter move to the next slide, and so you may not have a chance to enter, but I'll try and give everybody some time. Seems like we've got a good response group right now, 15 out of 18. Appreciate that feedback. So next question, how long have you been a resident of Gallatin? So some folks, maybe pretty new to Gallatin. Some folks maybe fourth generation. I didn't count it, Jeff, how many generations that was. Some folks might not be a resident. Maybe you're here visiting. Maybe you're a neighbor in a neighboring town. But always great to know, again, sort of who's the audience. And obviously I can tell right now it's folks that are here are usually ones that care, and often you will find that in folks that have been here for a long time. So not a particular surprise that we've got 3/4 that have been here for 10 plus years. So, awesome feedback. Thank you. So next is, what's your relationship to Gallatin? And in this one, you should be able to see on your phone there, you can select all that apply, because we know that a lot of folks have a lot of reasons that they're here, and a lot of things they have. So, homeowner, maybe you rent an apartment or a home. Maybe you're a business owner. Maybe you work in Gallatin. Maybe you live in Gallatin. Maybe you're none of these. Maybe you're all of them. So click through, with as many that fit you, that apply. Again, really super helpful for us to know who that feedback is coming from. That's great. Awesome. And then next question is how often do you frequent downtown Gallatin? And that is a comment without boundaries on it. I guess as I think about it, I sort of think of this sort of like historic core, but as we're talking about sort of this 2-block project, I'd say, what's sort of the frequency that you're coming sort of within, the sort of 15 blocks or 20 blocks here of downtown. We're south of Town Creek, so we're sort of within this zone. So it's awesome. I mean, we often find that it is, again, the most engaged people are the ones that are here using the town. So that's great feedback here as well. Thank you. So those were fantastic. A little bit of get to know you. So now we want to dive into architectural character of Gallatin. And again, because my firm is named Historical Concepts, it's hard for me not to take pictures of all the pretty old buildings. There are a lot of newer buildings as well in Gallatin. Gallatin is has had a lot of construction over a lot of years, and just driving in again today, I was reminded of just how many new buildings come in. Even you can when I think about libraries, you can think about historic libraries, you can think about new libraries that are on Main Street, courthouses, things like that. There's a lot of new design and architecture. So I don't want to sort of lead the witness with the beautiful old buildings that you have here, but we do want to know sort of where you all stand in terms of, as I said, when we start sort of sketching with our pencil, where should we land? And oftentimes when we come into a historic district, folks are sort of different minds. How much should new buildings blend in with Gallatin's existing character? And I want to say existing historic character, because that's really how we ask or pose the answers. And so, in your opinion, should new buildings be really traditional to match the historic buildings of Main Street? Should they kind of be a balance of traditional or contemporary? Or do you think they should be sort of clearly contemporary? Should you be able to walk down the street in a couple years and say, oh yeah, those buildings were built in 1898 and those in 1920, and these buildings were built in 2026. And so helpful for us to kind of get a pulse of the room and everybody who's online or watching on YouTube, sort of where folks want to be. And this is great. I was hoping for a few more responses than 13 here, so we'll wait until we get up to 75% responses. Terrific, we got 15. So again, sort of mixed, pretty clearly not all contemporary, which is good to see. Hey, there we go. All right, somebody had to do it. Who was it? But again, hey, listen, we are, as I said at the onset, we're outsiders, and so we do feel like when we're coming into town, in order to be stewards of the town, we want to make sure that we're sketching something that that is something that the town is going to love, and so we will definitely take this into account, looking at both traditional and also maybe or maybe I should say both a mix, which will include some contemporary and traditional, and some very traditional buildings obviously will be part of that as well. The next series of slides here, we've put up sort of a smattering of images here, and this is all again a sort of select all that apply. They're on the screen here. If you're on your phone, you can also click on each image. I did this just yesterday, and I found that I had to actually click kind of twice on it. I clicked once, and a little white line showed up, and then I clicked on it again, and it actually showed up a little larger. You can select any and all that apply here. So feel free to jump in there and just start grabbing the ones that you gravitate towards. There's some obviously that are a little more contemporary. There's some that are sort of pseudo-traditional. There's some that might feel a little bit more like a warehouse. There's some that feel a little bit more like a storefront or a row house. And so any and all feedback again is really help guiding us in what the designs are going to be. We're going to have 3 of these slides, so So if you see nothing on these, that's also okay. And hopefully you might see something on the next two that sort of grabs you and say, yeah, when I'm, again, sort of walking down the street in a couple years as this project is built, you'd be happy to see a building like that, or in that direction, sort of in that aesthetic direction. So this is great. Some clear winners, but actually it seems like we've got sort of a variety of responses. At least somebody liked just about every image. So thank you for this. I'm going to click through here to the next slide. So again, here's again another six images. As you look at it again, sort of from historic to contemporary. Some that are a little more block buildings, some that are sort of more broken up. But would appreciate any and all feedback from you all in terms of the images there. And again, if you're having any problems like clicking on the images, holler at us. John's probably the youngest guy here. He's a tech guy.
He's a tech guy loosely.
Always fear when I do this that I actually like put somebody's house up there or their business, but hopefully we got enough variety where so everybody gets a vote. That's good. That's great. We'll wait for just another minute, try and capture a few more votes of interest. But a lot of brick. I mean, obviously we see that so consistently here throughout the town. That building on the left is one of my favorites. It's a beautiful new building. I didn't have anything to do with it, but I think it's great. All right, we'll click through to the last architectural imagery slide. So again, sort of five more images. Some sort of 1-story and 2-story, a little more contemporary, a little more traditional. And some that kind of feel, a little bit like row houses maybe. It's a good variety in here. You guys are all pretty easy so far, pretty consistent too. But as I sort of scrutinize these things, I can really tell that there is a lot of variety, and there is actually here in town already. So the fact that we would sort of be continuing that with some of this feedback is really helpful. Sometimes when I look at images too, I kind of highlight it and I think, oh my gosh, is that, maybe this one's great because it's got a rooftop deck. That would be really interesting. So, again, this is sort of that first opportunity for us to get your feedback. We'll continue to get more and more as we go through this process. We did hear that, and obviously I mentioned new buildings before. We heard that the courthouse had, it's kind of a big project. It's right here on Main Street, and so really just kind of wanted to gauge the opinions of it. As I look at it, I see it's very traditional in a lot of ways. But yeah, you all, some people can already start to sort of see how to sort of vote on this one. That should be sort of like a sliding little meter there from hate it to love it. And we were asking sort of in two ways to think about it: architectural style and details and materials. So, that red brick is very consistent in Gallatin. Is that, how does that sort of fit, or what's your opinion of that in terms of that classical style? and how they've executed the details. And then sort of secondly, in terms of building height and scale and massing, it steps back from the street. It's got some sort of green space out in front. But you know, is it done successfully in your mind as you think about sort of how you have an opinion of it? And I don't know if the architect of that building was in the room. It was not me. So hopefully you guys can't offend anybody or make them really happy. So that's great. So it feels like, again, a lot of folks feel like, you know, stylistically from a detail and material standpoint, it's kind of okay. You know, it's maybe a little better than not, but maybe the building height, the scale and massing, you know, folks are sort of less excited about that. Great feedback. I wanted to dive in and ask a few more sort of project detail questions. And so, you know, again, understanding sort of what, you know, what we have, there's sort of unit count, there's other things, but as we think about what we can incorporate into the project, and I want to say sort of like site amenities or features, you know, this is 2 blocks. So we're not going to be able to have sort of everything under the sun. You wouldn't want everything under the sun in these blocks. So if we had to focus on a couple of kind of key things that would really be a benefit to the community, you know, for those of you that came down weekly, you'd want to come down daily, or for those of you that visit downtown, you know, infrequently, this would make you want to visit frequently. So, you know, first question there is parking green space. Again, we're asking you to sort of like select up to 3. That plaza and community gathering space, you know, if more folks were gravitating towards that, I kind of think of those as like hardscape areas as opposed to sort of grassy and green areas. Sometimes those are great for sort of a mix of festivals or outdoor gatherings. Obviously, you know, green space can do that as well. You know, plaza and community gathering space is sort of like, seems like that's a great place for a fountain and, you know, outdoor gathering. You know, shopping, new businesses, restaurants, that's sort of self-explanatory. You know, is there sort of an outdoor movies on the lawn? It's a little bit more sort of programmatic, but obviously it was something that we had included in that initial sketch. You know, the ability to engage Town Creek with a walkable greenway, maybe a new and improved farmers market. That's obviously sort of in the overall scope of our block structure, if that's really important to folks. And then parking. You know that every time we you know, get into one of these historic towns, they were not usually built for the car, and they're still struggling with it. So you're not alone. Parking is sort of always a key issue. One of the best things that you can have is a struggle with parking, because it means that you are a vibrant community and passionate about, you know, coming downtown and actually using these places. So we got a lot of consistency in terms of feedback here. This is super helpful. Obviously, you know, knowing that outdoor space is critical. New shopping, businesses, and the engagement with Town Creek. Obviously, parking is going to be a really key feature to us. That's one of the reasons we really encourage these sort of shared parking scenarios. You know, sort of conventionally, maybe for the past 50 years, you know, development has been that you sort of have to park yourself. So if you wanted to open up a restaurant, you would have to sort of also be able to handle your parking on your own. But when we looked at these great historic towns, having shared parking is a real opportunity to overlap uses. So hotel parking is something that's high demand in the evenings. You know, when you pair that next to an office, like, or a city hall, for example, that's high demand during the day. And so you get, there's great research out there about sort of the shared parking, where you're not just building that parking for one use, but you're building it for sort of multiple uses. And so the opportunity to sort of build that into the system and make sure that we're more than accommodating what's needed. Next, and you know, John and Jeff mentioned a few previous meetings they had. We've heard some concerns about the project. We've had the opportunity to engage with city staff a little bit as well, or town staff. So, if we think about sort of all the concerns that are out there, and obviously all of these can be concerns, and they're all concerns to us, we would love to sort of hear from you is what are those sort of technical aspects, we're going to call them technical aspects of the project, that, that you're sort of most interested in understanding more, sort of as we think about opportunities to engage in. Additionally, maybe that sort of work session. We want to be able to really hone in, what we're delivering by knowing what areas of concern have sort of the greatest need to focus. And it's not like we're going to ignore building height and scale if it doesn't get a lot of votes. It's something that will be of critical importance. But hearing exactly what we're getting this feedback right now is exactly what I want to see. Knowing that traffic flow and congestion are important already has me thinking about ways in and out of the garage, thinking about how we can really sort of diversify the flow of cars in and around the site. So this is exactly why we're doing this. We could guess at it in a vacuum, but getting your all's feedback is just invaluable. Perfect. All right, I'm going to move on. Again, I mentioned this is your town, not ours, not mine, and so. As you think about Gallatin, which is great, you also may visit other places that are aspirational. Places that you've been to. Maybe they're current projects, maybe they're historic neighborhoods, maybe they're towns, maybe it's a place you went on vacation. But yeah, what are other towns? And this is somebody's already jumping onto here. Freeform. Add sort of what other places should we consider looking at for precedent. That's really helping guide our process, and making sure that we can, look at things not just that we're aware of, but places that you all know. Columbia is a great little town. Actually, a lot of parallels there too. We see so frequently there's a parallel in, actually, I'll say, towns that really are thriving happen to be ones that are also county seats. I know that can, sometimes the sort of county and town can have a little bit of friction, but it's amazing to me, just sort of, across all of our studies, that we see that towns with county seats actually have really, continue to thrive and are actually in a really good spot to continue to sort of grow smartly as well. Yeah, Carmel, Indiana is a great one too. That's another spot. They had a really forward-thinking investment. They did an intense amount of underground parking, but what's magical about that place is that you walking above ground, you just wouldn't know what you're standing on top of, and so it's kind of like having a sewer. It's sort of like all the stuff that's sort of ugly that you don't want to deal with is underground, and now you've just got nothing but beautiful tree-lined streets and incredible shops and restaurants above town. So this is really great feedback. Harpeth Square is a great project. Obviously, partial to Savannah as well. Franklin as well. St. Charles, that's a good one. There's a Old Town St. Charles and a New Town St. Charles as well. So these are helpful to see. So gotten a lot of feedback. Actually, this is really great to get a ton of direction again from you all. So thank you all for this feedback. And that's really it from our standpoint. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's the first time that we've done something of that nature for Boyle from an interactive perspective, and I appreciate you guys coming and engaging. One note I do want to make, particularly for people that were at previous meetings or are watching, we put this together, just this last 2 weeks, and are going to put our heads together on a potential way to get this sent out to more people, whether it's people we've previously met, particularly downtown stakeholders or other folks within the community, if there's a way we can do this online to solicit some more feedback. We want to make kind of a couple of things clear. Again, just to reiterate, this is a gathering session of information, for us from people that have showed up with interest. We have, per the MOU, we're going to be moving. Right now, we call this, we're in conceptual design. Kind of our next steps are putting this together in a schematic design package. We will have to do, and we'll do a presentation with what we've gathered to date to the City Council prior to November 11th, as I've mentioned, for a work session. As we move from a timetable per the MOU, we really start putting together what we call our development plan. By the end of the first quarter of next year, we would have to have the feasibility of this project understood if it's going to move forward. I do want to make it clear that there is no guarantees that this project moves forward. There is no guarantee of that. I think there's been a lot of information out there on the project, and so just to reiterate, we are here. We've had the opportunity to engage and pursue the project from a due diligence standpoint, and now we're really starting to refine that. As a private developer, we continue to spend kind of more dollars and where we're going and past certain hurdles that are there for protection for the developer and for the city to say, hey, is this something that feasibly the constituents want? And as a developer, we always look at really four things. We look at the market, we look at the physical aspects of where we're doing something. The financial feasibility is obviously a big part of this, and then market, financial feasibility, and the regulatory environment. Obviously, in working with Gallatin to date, we believe this could be project have a lot of merit, but we're still there and trying to figure out where we're going to go next. So we've got some work to do here, really, in the next 6 to 7 months to make a determination for us and for this project. We're going to stay around. I think at this point we'll have the live feed will be done. I know we've talked quite a bit. We appreciate everybody's time. If you have particular questions that we can answer or anything else that we could potentially point to, we're glad to sit here and answer questions with you guys individually. And feel free, we can sit up here at the table or just float around the room. So we really appreciate you all being here tonight, and thank you so much for your time.